Today I'd like to share the tale of two women, Elizabeth and Ruth. The first woman was the woman who impressed the Japanese in World War II, and she was my grandaunt Elizabeth Choi. How many of you have heard of Elizabeth Choi? Her deeds of bravery had made into numerous school projects inspired by her character of courage and compassion. I have also written a historical novel on Aunt Elizabeth based on her true story, and the book is available for sale at a special price after the talk in the school canteen. This is the story of Elizabeth. At 16, Aunt Elizabeth left her home country of Borneo to come to a strange country of Singapore in 1929. She started her studies at CHIJ in Victoria Street, and she excelled in her studies, winning several awards. She was the eldest of 6 siblings, but sadly her mother passed away 2 years later, so she had to sacrifice a university education to take care of her family. In 1933, she taught at St. Margaret's School, your school, for 2 years till 1935. So Aunt has walked the halls of St. Margaret's School. Elizabeth would be very proud of all of you today because she strongly advocated for the education of young girls in early Singapore. In 1942, Singapore fell under the Japanese during World War II, and during the Japanese occupation, Aunt Elizabeth helped the 50,000 British and Australian prisoners of war in Changi Prison. She brought medicines to save them from dying due to the various diseases they caught. During a roundup in the prison over an unrelated incident, Aunt was subsequently arrested by the Japanese. She was imprisoned and tortured daily in the YMCA at Orchard Road for 193 days. Elizabeth said it was a living hell for her. No man could survive such brutality, let alone a woman, but Elizabeth survived. As a Christian, Aunt Elizabeth depended totally on God, who preserved her life miraculously. She was awarded the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth, which I wear today in her honor. She also received other medals for acts of kindness and charity. Elizabeth was virtuous, devoted, and faithful. Her godly speech was always loving, kind, and respectful, both to the Japanese torturers and her fellow inmates. She was an inspirational role model to those around her, and she put her whole trust in God, and He saw her faithfulness and preserved her life. Elizabeth lived a good long life, passing away at 96 on 14 September 2006, leaving a huge legacy in Singapore till today. The Japanese officers were so impressed with Elizabeth's inner strength and moral values and stood amazed at her attitude when they released her. So this is the story of Elizabeth Choi. Now we're looking at the other woman, which is Ruth. While Aunt Elizabeth's strong faith in God impressed the Japanese soldiers, there was also a strong and brave young woman, Ruth. Ruth was the woman who impressed God. Let's look at a video of the story.
It was a journey no one expected. Famine in Judah had brought them together in Moab, and now nothing could tear them apart. For Naomi, the return to Bethlehem was a bitter one. Behind her lay her husband and 2 sons, buried in foreign soil. For Ruth, a new land, a new people, a redeemer, an extraordinary journey of unyielding devotion. A love story for the ages.
All right, let's look at the story of Ruth in greater detail. So due to a severe famine in the land of Judah, Elimelech, a Jew, went to Moab with his wife and 2 sons. Here is the map of the route they took to and from Moab and Judah. The sons married two Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. They were not Jews. Sadly, after 10 years, all three women lost their husbands and became widows. Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem. So, despite Naomi's protest, her daughter in law Ruth was determined to return to Bethlehem with her. Are you sure, Ruth? Ruth said, Don't force me to leave you. Don't make me go home. Where you go, I go, and where you live, I'll live. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. So Naomi accepted Ruth, and they both headed back to Judah, and they arrived in Bethlehem at the time of the barley harvest. Ruth went out to harvest in the fields of Boaz, a wealthy and kind man who was a very good boss to his workers. Now Boaz noticed Ruth. He saw how beautiful she was both inside and out, and fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. Now, Hebrew law requires a near kinsman redeemer, usually a close relative of the husband of his widow, to marry her to continue her husband's lineage. So Boaz had to go through the necessary, customary, and legal procedures to claim her. Thankfully, this relative declined to marry Ruth, thus giving Boaz the chance to marry her. The book of Ruth is very special because it traces the messianic line of Jesus being the great grandmother of King David. We can learn from Ruth that she was virtuous, devoted, and faithful. Her godly speech was always loving, kind, and respectful, both to Naomi and Boaz. She was an inspirational role model to those around her, and she put her whole trust in God. Ruth trusted the Lord, and he rewarded her faithfulness by giving her not only a husband, but also a son, Obed, a grandson, Jesse, and a great-grandson, King David, the king of Israel. Ruth's legacy is listed in the lineage of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. The tale of two women bears similarities we can be inspired by. Virtuous. It means morally correct, upright, right thinking, honest, and incorruptible. Devotion to both God and family. Faithful to God, godly speech, loving, kind, and respectful to both authorities and peers, a role model for others, and a legacy left to inspire the generations to come. In conclusion, there are three great truths we can apply from the book of Ruth. God cares for you. In times of loss, discouragement, and loneliness, you can turn to God anytime because He loves you and understands your situation. Number two, God is totally interested in you. Sometimes because you're young, some may not see you as a somebody or someone important, but God sees something very special in you. Number three, and because you're special to Him, God has a wonderful plan for you. If things are difficult right now, He knows. It's just temporary for now, but remember, He's working out a good future for you. Elizabeth and Ruth are examples of Romans 8:28, which says, In all things, God works for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So let me just end with a prayer. Lord, teach us to offer you a heart of thanksgiving and praise in all our daily experiences of life. Teach us to be joyful always, to pray continually, and to give thanks in all our circumstances. We accept them as your will for our life. Change my outlook and attitude to one of contentment with my present circumstances. They're all part of your wonderful plan for me. So to all students and teachers, may the Lord continue to bless you in all ways in 1929, and may it be the best year ever for you. To God be all the glory. Amen.